The day of the first snow was also Ethan Hawthorne's birthday. To celebrate, Alara Vance had arrived at his house early, meticulously preparing a feast for him. She cooked his favorite dishes, bought a cake and a gift, and settled in to wait for him to come home. Snow blanketed the entire city in a sheet of white. Alara sat by the window, and the hours ticked by. Ethan was late. Just as she was about to send him a message, she absent-mindedly opened her social media feed. Juliet Fairchild's latest post was right at the top. An hour ago, she had posted 3 photos, and Ethan was in every single one. The first was a shot of his back as he leaned against the kitchen counter, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up while he cooked. The second showed him sitting at the dining table, patiently peeling shrimp for her. The third was of him watching over her by the bedside, a glass of warm milk resting on the nightstand. The caption read, "Whenever I need you, you're always there for me." Alara's hand trembled. A second later, her phone rang. It was Ethan. She already had a feeling what this was about. Sure enough, the moment she answered, Ethan's cool, magnetic voice drifted through the receiver. "Something came up today. I won't be able to make it back." Alara froze for a moment before asking, "Are you with Juliet?" He didn't hide it. "Yes, she just went through a breakup and is having a hard time. I have to be with her." Normally, knowing how much this would bother him, Alara would have just hung up. But today she couldn't help but plead, "But it's your birthday. I cooked for you, I even bought a cake. Can't you just come back for a little while?" Ethan's voice remained calm, but it carried a firmness that left no room for argument. "I can't. Juliet needs me right now. Thank you for thinking of my birthday." She wanted to say more, but a sound came from his end, and he spoke again. "Juliet's awake. I need to take care of her. Just leave the key on the table when you go." With that, he was in a hurry to end the call. Just before the line went dead, she heard Juliet's languid voice cooing at Ethan, and his tone shifted to a tenderness she had never heard before. "You're awake. Are you still feeling unwell? Okay, I won't leave. I'll stay right here with you." Staring at the darkened screen of her phone, Alara's heart sank into a bottomless pit. She had been by his side for so many years, yet he was still the same. One word from Juliet, and he would drop everything for her without a second thought. 10 years. She had transmigrated into this novel and spent 10 whole years with him. No one knew that this world was a novel about childhood sweethearts with a tragic ending. Juliet was the female lead, and Ethan was the devoted second male lead. They had grown up together. He had watched over her, comforted her when she cried, cherished her when she laughed, made her warm drinks when she was sick, and even gotten into fights for her. Unfortunately, the boy next door was no match for the charismatic newcomer. Juliet ultimately chose the novel's roguish male lead, Julian Sterling. In the end, everyone got their perfect ending, except for Ethan. He was trapped by the love he'd felt since youth, clinging to his obsession with Juliet, and doomed to a lonely end. The novel was incredibly popular, but it wasn't the male lead who captured the readers' hearts. It was Ethan, the devoted second male lead. In fact, he was so good that countless readers lamented his fate, demanding the author rewrite the ending. Alara was one of them. Having seen too much of the swipe-right era of dating, she understood the preciousness of lifelong devotion. So, when a system appeared in her mind and asked if she was willing to transmigrate into the book to change Ethan's fate, she had agreed without hesitation. From 16 to 26, for 10 years, she had been by Ethan's side through everything. Whether it was his parents' bitter divorce, the death of his grandmother, or every time his heart was broken because of Juliet. Day in and day out, she had truly fallen in love with him. But his heart was so steadfastly set on the female lead that her 10 years of companionship seemed to crumble at a single phone call from Juliet. For her, he would walk away in an instant. Swallowing the pain in her heart, Alara threw away the food on the table, cleaned the kitchen, and then set down the key, leaving with a sense of profound loss. The next morning, Alara brought the gift she hadn't been able to give him to the office. After graduating, she had chosen not to pursue a career in her own field, instead coming to his company to work as his assistant so she could better take care of him. As she arrived at her desk, she saw Juliet holding a large box of luxury chocolates, handing them out to everyone with a beaming smile. "Here, everyone, Mr. Hawthorne and I are together now. I brought these back from Europe for all of you. A little something to share the good news." Ethan, who was usually reserved and disliked such public displays, stood beside her, watching with a fond smile, his eyes full of affection. Everyone took the chocolates with polite smiles, already accustomed to her behavior. Over the years, her relationship with the male lead, Julian Sterling, had been a roller coaster of breakups and reconciliations. Every time they fought or split, she would come running to Ethan for validation. Ethan's love for her bordered on obsession. Even though Juliet would drop him in a heartbeat the moment Julian beckoned, he continued to indulge her, content to be her eternal backup plan. Watching Juliet's eager display, Alara's mind filled with images from the novel of Ethan's, countless moments of agony because of her. She couldn't bear to see Juliet squander Ethan's love like this any longer. As Juliet offered her a chocolate, Alara couldn't stop herself from speaking up. "Miss Fairchild, are you certain this time? Are you truly ready to be with Mr. Hawthorne?" she continued, "or is this just like all the other times, a way to make yourself feel better after being hurt by someone else?" Caught off guard by Alara's bluntness, Juliet froze, her face flushing a deep red. A second later, her eyes welled up with tears, making her look pitiful and wronged. "It's not what you think. Julian and I broke up for good this time." Seeing this, Ethan frowned and immediately stood up. He first wiped Juliet's tears with a pained expression, then turned to Alara, his voice laced with a cold warning. Alara Vance apologized to Juliet. He was normally so kind and gentle, but when it came to Juliet, he became fiercely protective, his usual softness hardening into an impenetrable suit of armor. Alara knew that if she didn't apologize, Juliet would just take out her anger on Ethan, and he would be the one to suffer in the end. A bitter taste filled her mouth. She looked at him for a long moment before forcing a smile at Juliet. "Miss Fairchild, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to target you. I just don't want to see Mr. Hawthorne's feelings be taken for granted." With that, she held out the gift she had prepared for Ethan. Yesterday was Mr. Hawthorne's birthday, but he didn't even get to eat a proper meal because he was taking care of you all day. "Miss Fairchild, I hope you won't let him down." Seeing the gift, Juliet was momentarily stunned before she took Ethan's hand, a look of guilt on her face. "Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot yesterday was your birthday. It's all my fault. How could I forget? I didn't even get you a gift. Wait right here. I'm going to make it up to you right now." She hurried off towards the small company kitchenette, repeatedly telling Ethan not to peek as she left. An hour later, she emerged, flustered, carrying 2 plates of slightly burnt food, which she placed on Ethan's desk with an embarrassed look. "Ethan, I don't know how to cook. This is the first time I've ever made a meal for someone. You should try it." Alara frowned at the 2 dishes, a beef and celery stir-fry and a braised fish, both loaded with chili peppers and looking utterly unappetizing. Ethan had stomach problems and could never eat spicy food. His most hated vegetable was celery, and he never ate fish. Juliet truly knew nothing about him. Alara was about to speak up, but Ethan stopped her with a single look. He quietly told her to get his stomach medication. Then, with a calm expression, he picked up a piece of the fish he would never normally touch and put it in his mouth. He looked at Juliet, his voice dripping with affection. "Who said you can't cook? This is delicious." Juliet's eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" Knowing she couldn't stop him, Alara silently handed him the antacids and a large glass of warm water, then watched as he forced down every last bite of the nauseating meal. He said, "Juliet, this is the best birthday present I've ever received." Meanwhile, her gift lay forgotten in the corner of the sofa, still unopened. In the days that followed, Juliet, likely trying to forget the pain of her breakup, spent all her time at the office with Ethan. Whatever he was doing, she was there, watching over his shoulder. But she was not the type to sit still and often caused minor trouble. For instance, she spilled ink on a crucial contract, nearly costing the company a multi-million-dollar project. Another time, while Ethan was in the middle of an important meeting, she called him, craving dumplings from a famous spot across town. Ethan immediately paused the meeting and drove there himself to buy them for her. For a man who had always put work first, a man who was meticulous in everything he did, he had broken his own rules for her countless times. Alara often watched him gaze at Juliet with that adoring look, as if he would forgive her for anything. One evening, Alara was working late with Ethan. As they were about to leave, Juliet's phone call came again. "Ethan, I want to go see the fireworks by the river. Will you come pick me up?" Ethan glanced out the window. December in the city was always rainy, and the weather was hardly suitable for fireworks. "It's raining pretty hard outside. How about another day?" Juliet's voice on the other end was suddenly tinged with tears. "No, I want to go today. You don't want to be with me, do you? Are you going to abandon me too?" Ethan's expression changed instantly, and he gave in without condition. "Don't be silly. How could I ever abandon you? Wait for me, I'm on my way." After hanging up, he looked at Alara calmly. Before he could even speak, she knew she was about to be left behind again. Before bed, she scrolled through Juliet's social media feed. There will always be someone willing to watch the fireworks with you. Only Alara knew that in the novel, the real reason Juliet had insisted on seeing fireworks that night was because Julian Sterling was also going to be by the river. Ethan was a smart man. How could he not have known? But he was also deeply in love, always willing to do anything Juliet wanted. The next day, during the lunch break, after coaxing Juliet to take a nap, Ethan returned to his desk. As he stood up, his face suddenly went pale, and he staggered forward. Alara quickly steadied him, only to realize his whole body was burning up. She knew it must have been from the night before, from standing in the rain while watching fireworks with Juliet. Knowing him, he would have given his own coat to her, leaving himself exposed to the elements. Worried, Alara tried to pull him towards the door to go to the hospital, but he gently pushed her away, creating a distance between them. His voice grew colder. "I'm not going. If I go to the hospital, Juliet will worry." And, he paused, "Alara, I know how you feel about me, so please keep your distance. Juliet is very insecure, and I don't want her to get the wrong idea." Alara's hands were still frozen in midair. After hearing his words, she felt as if a knife had been brutally twisted in her heart, the pain so sharp she couldn't even speak. He really did love Juliet. He loved her so much that he was willing to keep his distance from all other women, even her, the one who had been with him for 10 years. She gave a bitter smile. In the end, she said nothing and walked out of the CEO's office with heavy steps. That evening, Ethan and Alara were to attend a business gala, and Juliet insisted on coming along. "Ethan, I want to be with you every moment. Please take me with you, okay?" He smiled faintly and gently tapped her on the forehead. "All right, I'll take you." On the way there, Alara sat in the front passenger seat, while the two in the back were so wrapped up in each other they seemed to completely ignore her existence. The gala was held outdoors. After they arrived, Ethan was about to get some fruit for Juliet when she suddenly grabbed his arm in a panic. "Ethan, my necklace, it fell into the pool. That necklace is very important to me. Can you help me find it, please?" Even though he was still running a high fever, he heard her plea and simply nodded. Without a word, he took off his jacket and prepared to jump into the pool. A sharp pain pierced Alara's heart. She quickly reached out and stopped him. Then, under his stunned gaze, she jumped into the pool before he could. It was winter now, and the pool water was near freezing. In the water, Alara was so cold she could barely feel her limbs. She dove to the bottom, fumbling in the dark for a long time before finally finding Juliet's necklace. As she climbed out of the water, a strange emotion flickered in Ethan's eyes, but he said nothing, merely turning to go inside and get her a dry towel. Alara hugged her arms, her entire body feeling as though it were being pricked by 1,000 icy needles. Shivering uncontrollably, she handed the necklace to Juliet. "Here, Miss Fairchild, hold on to it tight this time. Don't drop it in the water again." Juliet took the necklace, stared at it for a few seconds, then curled her lip in disdain and casually tossed it into the bushes. Stunned by her action, Alara grabbed her hand. "Why did you throw it away?" Juliet remained nonchalant. "It's dirty now. I don't want it anymore." A fire of pure rage ignited in Alara's chest. She gripped Juliet's hand tighter, her voice trembling with anger. "Then why did you make Ethan go in after it? Do you have any idea that he's running a high fever right now?" Juliet frowned, annoyed, her gaze flippant. "So what? What's it to you? He was willing to get it for me. Who are you to interfere?" Seeing her complete lack of concern, Alara's anger reached its peak. She raised her hand, but before she could touch Juliet, Juliet threw herself onto the grass. Ethan, who had just returned with a dry towel, rushed over to help her up, then glared at Alara with fury. "Alara Vance, what are you doing?" Before Alara could speak, Juliet fell into his arms, her face a mask of grievance. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have asked you to get the necklace for me." "Ethan, please don't blame Alara. She was just worried about you." Ethan's eyes were as cold as ice, and he shot Alara a look that was both chilling and merciless. "What happens between Juliet and me is none of your business. Please do not interfere." "I love Juliet, and I am willing to do anything for her." He was usually so gentle. It was rare for him to speak so harshly. It was clear he was truly angry. With that, he took Juliet's hand and walked away, not sparing Alara another glance. The gala venue was far from the city center. Drenched and shivering, Alara walked along the street, unable to hail a cab. She didn't know how long she walked before she finally made it home. The moment she opened the door, she collapsed. After that day, she came down with a high fever and had to take a few days off to rest. Ethan never asked about her. Lying in bed, feverish and dazed, she could only scroll through her phone, keeping up with their lives through Juliet's social media feed. Juliet's birthday was approaching. She posted that she wanted to see the snow, so Ethan decided to buy a snow-capped mountain and build a castle on it, just to make her happy. The comments section was filled with envious remarks, all saying that Ethan spoiled Juliet beyond measure. Alara shut off her phone with a bitter heart and buried herself under the covers. On the day of Juliet's birthday, Alara couldn't contain her curiosity. Even knowing it would hurt, she wanted to see what the Snow Mountain Castle, the one Ethan had poured all his heart into, looked like. With this thought, she opened Juliet's social media page. But when it loaded, she discovered that Juliet had deleted all her posts related to Ethan, leaving only a single new one from today. The picture was of her holding hands with Julian Sterling. The caption read, "After all this time, it's still you." Alara's mind went blank with a deafening buzz. She couldn't hear anything. She was back with Julian Sterling, but if she was back with him, then what did that make Ethan these past few weeks? What was all his effort for? She quickly grabbed her phone and dialed Juliet's number. "Miss Fairchild, didn't you say you had broken up with Julian Sterling for good, that you would never get back together and would be with Mr. Hawthorne?" Juliet's tone was full of innocence. "I did say that. But I really tried to like Ethan, I did. I just can't lie to my own heart. The one I love is still Julian, so I had no choice but to let Ethan down." Alara felt like her lungs were about to explode. She wanted nothing more than to slap that smug look right off her face. But right now, the most important thing was to find Ethan. He had treated this relationship with such reverence. How devastated would he be to find out that Juliet was back with Julian again? "Then where is Ethan? Where is he?" Juliet answered casually. "Ethan. Oh, he's probably still at Avalon Peak working on the castle. It's perfect, actually. You can go and comfort him." Alara's head was spinning. There was no time to deal with Juliet. The thought of Ethan, all alone on that snowy mountain, filled her with dread. She hung up, scrambled out of bed, and started changing her clothes to go out. Just as she finished dressing, an emergency news report flashed across the television screen. Breaking news. A major avalanche has occurred on Avalon Peak. 19 casualties have been confirmed so far. She felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Avalon Peak? Wasn't that where Ethan was? Alara stood frozen for a long moment before the reality of the situation crashed down on her. The next second, she grabbed her phone and bolted out the door. On the way there, Alara's heart was in her throat. She stared anxiously ahead, repeatedly urging the driver to go faster, faster. By the time she reached the foot of the mountain, the rescue team was already packing up, preparing to leave. She ran up to them in a panic. "You can't leave, there's still someone up there." One of the rescuers continued packing his equipment and said, "We've already done a full sweep. The snow is coming down too hard now. The conditions are impossible for a search. We'll have to wait for it to stop and reassess." Another added, "Besides, the chances of surviving an avalanche are slim. I'd suggest you prepare for the worst." Seeing that they wouldn't go back up the mountain, Alara was frantic. She gritted her teeth, ignored their calls from behind her, and charged up the mountain alone. The mountain was a vast expanse of white. The biting wind felt like a knife slicing at her cheeks, but she couldn't feel it. Her mind was consumed with one thing: Ethan's safety. With the snow falling so heavily and the temperatures so cold, every minute she was delayed in finding him was another minute he was in danger. Alara shouted until her throat was raw. Finally, under a large tree, she found him, unconscious. After feeling for a pulse and finding that he was still breathing, Alara finally broke down in tears. She hugged him tightly, taking off her own scarf and hat and putting them on him. "Ethan, I will get you out of here." With that, she tied her coat to some branches, fashioning a makeshift stretcher, and began to drag him, step by agonizing step, down the mountain. The blizzard was so intense she could barely see the path ahead, but a single conviction burned in her mind. She had to get Ethan out. She couldn't let him die on this frozen mountain. At some point, her hands had been shredded by the branches, her face was drained of all color from the cold, and her knees slammed into rocks, soaking her pants with blood that stained the snow a stark red. She moved forward, one arduous step at a time. She didn't know how much time had passed before she finally managed to drag Ethan to the base of the mountain. The remaining crew members who saw her were stunned. It took an incredible amount of conviction for one woman to carry a man a head taller than herself down from a snow-covered mountain. The ambulance arrived and finally took them both to the hospital. Along the way, Alara held Ethan's hand tightly, refusing to let go. It was as if only by holding on this tightly could she keep him from leaving her. The doctors had to pull them apart to rush Ethan into the emergency room. But a moment later, the doors to the ER burst open again. A doctor walked over to Alara, removed his mask, and shook his head with a grave expression. "Mr. Hawthorne's kidney has ruptured. We're not getting any vital signs." Alara felt as if a bolt of lightning had struck her. Every cell in her body screamed in agony. She sank to her knees before the doctor, begging hysterically. "Please, save him, I'm begging you. I'll do anything you ask, just please save him." She was covered in blood, and from her frantic pleading, her face was paler than paper. Seeing her sheer desperation, the doctor had no choice but to turn around and re-enter the operating room. Alara collapsed onto the floor, feeling the warmth drain from her body, bit by bit. How could Ethan die? That wasn't how his story was supposed to end in the book. He couldn't die, he just couldn't. She shakily got to her feet, staring helplessly at the closed doors of the operating room. A single thought consumed her. As long as Ethan could be saved, she would pay any price. At that exact moment, a familiar voice echoed in her mind. The devoted second male lead, Ethan Hawthorne, is in critical condition and about to go offline. Do you wish to continue the salvation? If you choose to continue, you will pay a heavy price. Please choose. A sharp pang shot through Alara's heart. As long as Ethan could live, she would willingly bear any price, no matter how heavy. She lifted her head, her gaze firm, and made her choice. The voice quickly vanished, and in that instant, she felt a sudden, strange shift within her body. Alara stayed by Ethan's bedside for a day and a night. The doctors told her she was injured too and needed rest. But her worry for Ethan was so overwhelming that rest was the last thing on her mind. 2 days later, Ethan finally woke up. He looked at Alara, who was slumped over by his bed, and frowned. His last memory was of the avalanche. Now he was in a hospital. He assumed the rescue team had found and saved him, so he didn't ask any questions. Seeing him awake, Alara let out a breath of relief, then looked into his eyes with concern. "Are you in pain anywhere? Are you hungry? What would you like to eat? I'll go get it for you." Ethan stared at her deeply but said nothing. Seeing the sorrow in his eyes hurt Alara more than her own injuries. She knew he was grieving over Juliet. He loved her so much, only to be used and hurt by her time and time again. Alara reached out and took his hand. "Forget about Juliet," she urged. "There's no future for you two. She's not right for you. Can't you just look at the people who are right here beside you?" Ethan expressionlessly pulled his hand away, his tone flat. "I can't forget her. She's the only one I will ever love." With that, he turned on his side, closed his eyes, and refused to look at Alara again. Alara bit her lip until it hurt. She wanted to say more, but suddenly, something warm rushed from her nose. She quickly pressed her hand to her face and scrambled into the bathroom. It was only then that she saw the blood pouring from her nose, so much that she couldn't stop it. She splashed her face with water, her reflection pale and frightened. After a long while, the bleeding finally stopped. She looked up at herself in the mirror. She didn't know when she had become so gaunt. Could it be? Was the heavy price she had to pay for her choice her own life? Alara didn't know, and she didn't dare to think about it. She had made the choice to save Ethan, and she would not regret it. The day Ethan was discharged, Juliet showed up. She was holding a large bouquet of lilies, her face a mask of apology as she looked at Ethan. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." She had barely spoken a few words before tears began to stream down her face like broken pearls. It was always like this. After betraying Ethan for Julian, she would put on a pitiful act and apologize, and he would forgive her without question. Ethan could forgive her for hurting him again and again, but Alara couldn't. Especially not this time, when he had almost lost his life because of her. Alara stepped in front of him, snatched the bouquet from Juliet's hands, and threw it to the ground. "Miss Fairchild, are you really here to apologize? Don't you know that Mr. Hawthorne is allergic to pollen?" Juliet looked at Ethan, a flicker of panic on her face. "Ethan, why did you never tell me?" Alara stared at her coldly. "Would you have cared if he had? When have you ever paid any attention to him? Miss Fairchild, please, stop bothering Mr. Hawthorne. He is not a toy you can pick up and discard whenever you please." Juliet's eyes filled with tears, and she turned to leave, looking utterly wronged. "It's my fault, I'm sorry, Ethan. I won't bother you again." As she turned to go, Ethan suddenly grabbed her arm. "Juliet, don't go." Juliet immediately covered her face and began to sob. "Ethan, do you hate me now? You never want to see me again, do you?" Ethan's brow furrowed. He gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. "No, I could never blame you." The next second, he looked up at Alara, his gaze transforming into a cold, sharp blade that stabbed mercilessly into her. "You have no right to meddle in my affairs with Juliet. Just go." Alara's heart lurched as if a chasm had suddenly opened within it, letting in an icy wind. She stared at Ethan in despair. He was completely focused on comforting Juliet, not even sparing her a single glance. The sleepless nights she had spent taking care of him had left her utterly exhausted. Without another word, she turned and left the hospital. When she got home, her nose started bleeding again. She stood in front of the mirror, watching impassively as the water in the sink turned crimson with her blood. How much time did she have left? How much longer could she stay by Ethan's side? Alara rested at home for a few days before returning to the office. Ethan hadn't called once, but she was used to that by now. Juliet was back with Julian, so she hadn't come looking for Ethan. Still, Alara would occasionally catch glimpses of Juliet's life through mutual acquaintances or her social media feed. Julian had given her a one-of-a-kind necklace. Julian had taken her to a rooftop to watch fireworks over the entire city. Julian had named a subsidiary of his company after her. Love and the lack of it were obvious. Juliet's posts were filled with her affection for Julian. Looking at the pictures and captions, Alara felt nothing but a deep ache for Ethan. He cared so much for Juliet. How much pain must he be in seeing all of this? Whenever she went into the CEO's office to deliver documents, she would find him either staring blankly out the massive floor-to-ceiling window or lost in thought as he gazed at a picture of Juliet. Alara knew that all she could do now was be there for him. When he forgot to eat, she would secretly make him a balanced meal and leave it on his desk. When he worked late into the night, she would wait silently for him by the office door. When he dozed off on the sofa, she would gently cover him with a blanket to keep him from getting cold. Watching his sleeping face, Alara couldn't resist reaching out and lightly tracing her fingers along his cheek. She wondered how much time she had left to just quietly watch him like this. Suddenly, he grabbed her hand, enveloping it in his own. His eyes were shut tight, his brow furrowed. "Juliet, don't go," Alara froze. Her heart clenched painfully, and she felt a warm trickle from her nose. She reluctantly pulled her hand from his grasp and fled to the restroom. A few days later, Ethan brought Alara along to a business dinner to secure an important partnership. The entire company had been preparing for this project for a long time, and Ethan himself had pulled 3 all-nighters for it, his eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. The negotiations with the other party's representative were going smoothly. It seemed the deal would be sealed by the end of the dinner. But just then, Ethan's phone rang. It was the ringtone he had set exclusively for Juliet. Alara recognized it instantly. Before he could answer, she pressed her hand on his, her eyes pleading with him. "Don't answer it," her meaning was clear. Tonight's dinner was crucial. Nothing was more important than business. He had worked so hard for this. It couldn't all be for nothing because of a single phone call from Juliet. But Ethan's expression darkened. After a moment's hesitation, he pulled his hand away, picked up his phone, and stepped outside. Alara curled her lips into a bitter smile. How could she have been so foolish? She knew perfectly well that in Ethan's heart, Juliet trumped everything, yet she still deluded herself into thinking she could stop him from answering her call. A few minutes passed, and Ethan still hadn't returned. She stood up, apologized to the partners, and pushed open the door. Ethan was standing in the hallway. Even through the phone, she could hear Juliet's sobs. "Ethan, what am I going to do? Being with him is so exhausting. I'm just so tired." Ethan's voice was gentle as he comforted her. "Don't do anything foolish. Just stay where you are. I'm on my way." After hanging up, he looked up and met Alara's sorrowful gaze. Love meant knowingly doing the impossible. This was as true for Ethan as it was for Alara. She grabbed his hand. "Don't go. At least wait until after dinner, until the contract is signed. Please." Ethan yanked his hand away without a second thought. "Juliet needs me. I promised her that whenever she needs me, I will be there for her." With that, he turned and strode away without a backward glance. Watching Ethan's retreating back, Alara's heart sank to the depths of despair. She hadn't realized his obsession with Juliet ran so deep, that 10 years of her life had failed to change it one bit. After his grandmother's death and his parents' divorce, the responsibility for Hawthorne Group had fallen squarely on his shoulders. For years, he had treated the company as if it were more important than his own life. But when it came to Juliet, what did the Hawthorne Group matter? Alara couldn't bear to see all of Ethan's hard work go to waste. Composing herself, she put on a smile and Ray entered the private dining room. For the head of a company to suddenly leave a meeting was a grave insult. To make amends, Alara went around the table, toasting each person individually, which only slightly eased their anger. But securing the partnership was no longer so simple. The lead negotiator frowned and slammed 10 bottles of whiskey down on the table. "Miss Vance, since your boss was the one to be so rude, if you still want this partnership, you'll drink all of this. Then we'll see that you're serious." Alara couldn't drink, and with her health deteriorating, finishing all this would probably kill her. Seeing her hesitate, the man made a move to stand up. "If you don't want to drink, fine. In that case, this partnership is off the table." Alara quickly stopped them. "Wait, I'll drink." "I'll drink." She opened a bottle, tilted her head back, closed her eyes, and started chugging the liquor. 1 bottle, 2, 3, by the time she was done, she had collapsed to the floor, too weak to even stand. Seeing how determined she was, the men decided not to press the issue of Ethan's sudden departure any further. They signed the contract and left. Alara staggered to her feet to see them out. The moment she turned back, she could no longer hold it in and rushed to the bathroom, where she was violently ill. Her body felt like it was falling apart. Her face was hot. She wiped her mouth and looked down to see her hand was covered in blood. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone and managed to dial Ethan's number. The phone rang a few times before it was mercilessly disconnected. Undeterred, Alara called again, only to get the same result. She let out a bitter laugh. The blood was now pouring from her nose, staining her clothes a deep crimson. In the end, it was a restaurant employee who found her on the verge of collapsing and called an ambulance. On the way to the hospital, the bleeding wouldn't stop. The paramedics told her they needed to contact her family. In an emergency, they needed a relative's signature to operate. But she had no family in this world. She had come here for Ethan. The only person in this world who could be considered her family was him. She gave the paramedics Ethan's number. When one of them called from their phone, it actually connected after 2 rings. "Hello, are you a relative of Miss Vance? She may need surgery and requires family present. Are you able to come to the hospital now?" Ethan paused for a moment. "What happened to her?" The paramedic glanced at Alara and answered truthfully. "She drank too much. It's alcohol poisoning." Even through the phone, Ethan's voice was cool and detached. "I'm not her family. Besides, I have something more important to do right now. Have her contact someone else." Alara closed her eyes, and a tear slid silently down her cheek. In his heart, her life and death were far less important than comforting Juliet through another breakup. Fortunately, by the time she got to the hospital, the bleeding had stopped. The doctor said she had overdone it with the alcohol and would need a few IV drips before she could go home. Lying in the hospital bed, Alara stared listlessly at the white ceiling above. Suddenly, a clock appeared before her eyes. It chimed 3 times, and then a countdown began. The countdown was for the last 24 hours of her life. Alara's body went rigid. She knew she was about to die. With only 24 hours left, Alara no longer held any hope of changing Ethan's fate. In that case, let her do one last thing for him. After leaving the hospital, Alara went straight to Ethan's house. He had given her a spare key for convenience. She gently turned the key and opened the door. Just as she always had, she pushed through the pane and cleaned every room. The house was already tidy. He was a neat freak. But a thin layer of dust had settled on the floors, a sign that he hadn't been home in a while. After cleaning, she hung a new painting she had bought on the living room wall and arranged fresh flowers in a vase. Ethan was a quiet, somewhat somber person. The decor of his home reflected that cool, minimalist, and devoid of life. It had always been her who filled the house with plants and flowers, who stocked the refrigerator with fresh fruits and vegetables, bringing a touch of vitality to the space. With only 24 hours left, this would be the last time she would do this for him. Once everything was in order, she returned to her own apartment, packed up all her furniture and belongings, and called a moving company. The movers assumed she was relocating. They were shocked when they arrived at their destination, the city dump where she intended to burn everything. One of the workers looked at the perfectly good furniture and sighed. "This is all such nice stuff. What a shame to just throw it away." She offered a bitter smile. "I'm dying. There's no use in keeping it." The worker's face filled with pity, and he didn't dare say another word. Finally, after settling all her affairs, she called Ethan. She asked him to meet her at a coffee shop. Before she went, she carefully applied her makeup. This would be the last time she saw Ethan, and she wanted him to remember her looking her best. That way, years from now, when he thought of her, it would be a beautiful image. She had rehearsed so many farewell speeches in her head, but she never expected him to bring Juliet with him. After a moment of shock, a bitter smile touched Alara's lips, and her expression returned to normal. She should have known, after Juliet had called him away last time. She and Julian must have had another fight, so she had once again sought refuge in her safe harbor, Ethan. Perhaps because she was so close to death, Alara no longer felt the emotional turmoil she once did. She watched calmly as Ethan sat across from her, treating Juliet with his usual tenderness, blowing on her coffee to cool it before handing it to her. When he finally looked at Alara, his deep eyes were tinged with coldness. "It's a good thing you called. There's something I need to tell you too. Juliet and I are officially together now. Your presence makes her uncomfortable, so consider this your notice. You're terminated as of tomorrow. I'll give you a severance package of 10 times your salary as thanks for your years of service. From now on, I don't want to see you again." After 10 years by his side, this was how he was letting her go. He must have expected her to cry, to argue, to make a scene, but she said nothing. She just looked at him quietly, her eyes filled with sorrow. It was just like all the years before. She had always been his silent guardian. Knowing he preferred quiet, she had always been considerate, never speaking out of turn. But whenever he needed her, he only had to look over his shoulder and she would be there. The silence stretched on, becoming so heavy he felt he could barely breathe. Just as he was about to speak again, Alara stood up. She finally spoke, but her words were not for him. She looked at Juliet. "Cherish the one who's right in front of you. Otherwise, when you lose him, the pain will be worse than death." With that, she turned and walked out, her steps unsteady. Behind her, Ethan watched her leave. For some reason, the feeling of suffocation in his chest grew heavier and heavier. He had thought she would be angry, furious even. He had expected her to at least say something to express her discontent, but she said nothing. Her eyes were so calm, as if nothing mattered anymore. It was only then that he realized, at some point, she had become so thin. He unconsciously clenched his fists, a sudden, overwhelming fear of losing everything washing over him. She never once looked back. As soon as Alara stepped out of the coffee shop, before she had even gone far, blood began to pour from her nose. In her mind, the final countdown began. 10, 9, 8, 7. Alara trembled, her face ashen. She dragged her heavy feet forward, one step at a time. The countdown in her head was relentless, like a death knell. 3, 2, 1. As the countdown finished, with a soft thud, she collapsed to the ground. The sunlight was blinding. As her vision blurred, an image surfaced in her mind. The first time she had seen Ethan, walking towards her in a white shirt. Under the sycamore trees, the sun was perfect. She was in a white dress, cautiously extending her hand to the boy who had captured her heart. Hello, Ethan. My name is Alara Vance. There was something she hadn't told him then. Ethan, I came to this world to save you. From now on, no matter what, I will always be by your side. You will never be alone again. Lying in a pool of her own blood, Alara weakly closed her eyes. A tear slid silently from the corner of her eye. Ethan, from today on, I can't be with you anymore. People began to gather around, their voices a rising tide of panic. Someone help, a woman has collapsed. Oh my God, she's bleeding so much, call 911, someone call 911. Help, does anyone know CPR? I don't think she's breathing. Ever since he and Alara had parted ways, Ethan had been plagued by a constant sense of unease. She had been by his side for so many years. They had never gone this long without contact. Frustrated, he closed the contract he was reviewing and leaned back on the sofa, trying to clear his head. His new assistant knocked and entered the office. After placing a folder on his desk, she noticed his foul mood and cautiously asked, "Mr. Hawthorne, are you in a bad mood because of that video of you that went viral?" Ethan's head snapped up. What video? Surprised that he didn't know, the assistant quickly took out her phone, found the video, and showed it to him. It's the video from when you were trapped on the mountain during the avalanche and then rescued. I can't believe Miss Vance, all by herself, went through so much to save you. Ethan felt a roar in his ears as he took the phone. He had always thought it was the rescue team that saved him, but the video showed the truth. On the day of the avalanche, it was Alara who had found him. She had covered him with all of her own winter clothing, placed him on a makeshift stretcher, and dragged him, step by step, down the mountain. The journey down was long and treacherous, but she never gave up. It took her an entire night to get him to safety, leaving a trail of her own blood in the snow. He had thought his injuries weren't severe, but the video showed the doctor declaring him dead. And it was Alara, again, who refused to give up, begging the doctor to try and save him. In the video, she was on her knees, covered in blood, her heart-wrenching sobs echoing through the hospital hallway. "Doctor, no, he's not dead, I'm begging you. Please try to save him. Please. If you save him, I'll do anything." When he was finally rushed back into the emergency room, it was Alara who waited outside. She knelt at the door of the operating room, her hands clasped together in desperate, fervent prayer. "Please, God, let him be okay. Please protect Ethan." In that moment, Ethan couldn't describe the feeling that tore through him. It was as if someone had ripped his heart out of his chest or taken a hammer and smashed it against his skull. She had done so much for him, and she had never said a single word. At that moment, only one thought consumed him. He had to see Alara. He dropped the phone and shot to his feet, but as he reached the office door, he heard Juliet's voice from the hallway. She was on the phone with someone, her tones sweet and coquettish. "Julian, I'll never be mad at you again. I'll believe anything you say. Can we get back together?" A tremor ran through Ethan, and a wave of fury washed over him. He kicked the door open. "You're trying to get back with Julian Sterling again?" Juliet quickly hung up, her face paling in panic when she saw Ethan. Ethan, I'm sorry." Ethan fought to control his rage, his voice trembling. "You were the one who said you were done with him. You were the one who said you would be with me, and only me. Juliet, I'm going to ask you one last time. It's me or Julian. You can only choose one. Who is it?" Juliet burst into tears, stammering, unable to say his name. In that instant, Ethan's restraint shattered. He roared, his eyes red with fury. "Juliet, what do you take me for? All these years, I've given you everything you've ever wanted. But you, all I ever wanted was for you to love me, and only me. Why is that so hard?" But as the words left his mouth, a shocking realization hit him. After all these years of loneliness, all he had ever wanted was a love that was solely his, someone who would choose him, steadfastly, and stay by his side. Juliet couldn't do that. But Alara, for all these years, that was exactly what she had done. To love one person with all your heart, wasn't that Alara all along? In all the choices Juliet couldn't make, Alara had always, without fail, chosen him. When his parents divorced and he ran away from home, hiding in a dark alley, it was she who had found him with a flashlight and led him home. When he first took over Hawthorne Group and had no one to support him, it was she who had given up her own career path to become his most capable assistant, staying with him on his journey to the top. When his beloved grandmother died, he had knelt at her grave for a day and a night, and she had knelt beside him for just as long. In his darkest moments, she was always there. "Ethan, I'm here. You'll never be alone." The cruel irony was that he was only just now realizing it. At that moment, his desire to see Alara became an all-consuming need. He no longer cared about Juliet's answer. He rushed out, got in his car, and sped towards Alara's apartment. A 30-minute drive, he made it in 15. When he arrived at her door, for the first time in his life, he lost all his composure. With trembling hands, he hammered on the door. But no matter how many times he called her name, the apartment remained silent. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number, only to be met with a notification that the phone was turned off. He knew, after how he had treated her, she must be angry with him. Just as he was about to knock again, the door to the neighboring apartment opened and an irritated man appeared. "Stop knocking, the young woman who lived here died a week ago." Ethan's body went rigid. He whipped around. "Who did you say died?" The neighbor stepped out and pointed at the door Ethan had been pounding on. "Are you looking for the young lady who lived here? Is her name Alara Vance?" "She's dead, been dead for a week. They already took her body for cremation." Ethan could hardly believe what he was hearing. He ignored the man and turned back to the door, knocking again, more gently this time. "Alara, are you in there? Can you open the door? I need to talk to you. Please let me in." The man behind him watched, his face etched with annoyance. "Are you deaf? I told you she's dead. If you're her friend, how could you not know? A week ago, she collapsed outside and died from a sudden illness. The poor girl must have known she was sick because she cleared out everything she owned a while ago. The apartment is empty." The world went dark for a moment, and Ethan nearly collapsed. A week ago, that was the day he had fired her for Juliet. Could it be? Was that why she had asked to see him that day? To tell him what was happening to her? But before she could, he had told her to never appear before him again. What had he done? Ethan's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white. He stood at the door for a long time before his mind cleared. He remembered that Alara had given him a spare key a long time ago. He had never used it and had no idea where he had put it. He immediately called his assistant, telling him to find that key and bring it to him, no matter what it took. The neighbor, seeing that he wasn't leaving, muttered a few more words and went back inside. As dusk fell, Ethan sat on the floor outside her door, stubbornly waiting, refusing to believe she was gone. Finally, his assistant arrived with the key. When Ethan opened the door, he saw that the man had been telling the truth. Everything was gone. The apartment was completely empty. In the barren space, there was no trace that Alara had ever lived there, except for a single diary that had been missed, lying under the desk in the study. With trembling hands, Ethan picked it up, not daring to open it. If Alara was truly gone, what would he do? For all these years, she had been a constant presence in his life. He could hardly imagine a life without her. An immense sorrow washed over his handsome face. He remembered the first time they had met, 10 years ago. Alara had appeared in his life like a small sun, illuminating his world. While he had focused all his attention on Juliet, Alara had been quietly warming him with her own light. She would bring him water when he played basketball, copy notes for him when he was sick after rescuing a drenched Juliet, give him medicine, and wrap her own scarf around his neck. He remembered her smiling at him on that first day. "Ethan, I'm here. I'm going to make you happy." He saw it now. The signs had been there all along. Over the years, she had been so good to him, he couldn't even remember all the ways. When had they become friends? It must have been when his parents were fighting and he ran away from home, getting lost in a dark alley. He had huddled in a corner, thinking that if he just disappeared, maybe his parents would make a different choice for his sake. He had desperately wished for Juliet to be there with him, but she wasn't. She hadn't even called. It was Alara who had run through the dark, holding a small light, her face frantic as she rushed towards him. She had said, "Ethan, let's go home." In that moment, he suddenly felt that his parents separating might not be so unbearable after all. So he accepted it. After graduating, he went straight to work at the company, and it was Alara again who was there by his side without a second thought. She had said, wherever he went, she would follow. He was young and arrogant back then and had faced many hardships. Though they were the same age, Alara had always seemed remarkably mature. She would consider every angle of a problem, accompany him to business dinners, hand him a glass of water when his stomach ached, and offer the best solution when he was lost. She was less of an assistant and more of an all-knowing encyclopedia. Ethan couldn't imagine how he would have survived those years without Alara. When his grandmother died, he felt as if his world had collapsed. She was the one who had raised him, the pillar of support that had encouraged him to take over the company. He had knelt at her grave for a day and a night. And Alara had knelt right there beside him for a day and a night. She had gently hugged him, comforting him. "I'm here, Ethan. I will always be with you." But she had broken her promise. Ethan took the diary home with him. He walked like a zombie, numbly returning to his house. He still couldn't accept that Alara was gone. How could someone who was perfectly fine just a few days ago suddenly die? She must be doing this to punish him. Because he had chosen Juliet over her, again and again. So now she was making him worry, trying to drive him mad with this cruel game. He hadn't been home in a long time. Ever since Juliet had come to him, he had been staying at her apartment. When he opened the door, the faint scent of flowers still lingered in the air. He looked at the tidy room, at the wilting flowers on the balcony, and his heart clenched violently. It felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing his throat, making it hard to breathe. He walked over to the flowers. They had been there for a while, probably for about a week. The water in the vase was nearly gone, and petals littered the floor. He knelt, picking up the petals one by one with a trembling hand. Then he went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was packed with fruits and vegetables, nearly all of them covered with sticky notes. He could see Alara's handwriting on them. "Remember to eat some fruits and vegetables every day. These won't be fresh after today. Eat the ones in the back first. Drink more water, less coffee. It's bad for your stomach." Ethan carefully removed each note, collected them, and placed them in a drawer in his study. Night fell, and for the first time, Ethan felt a profound, crushing loneliness. No matter how late he had come home in the past, he had never felt this lost, this anxious. Unwilling to give up, he took out his phone and dialed Alara's number again. Just like every other time he had called that day, there was no answer. He stared at the number, a number that would never pick up again, and a hollow, terrifying emptiness filled him. Alara never missed his calls. Even if she couldn't answer right away, she would always call him back quickly. But now, a full day had passed, and there was still no word from her. Could it be that she was really, no, absolutely not the thought, fleeting as it was enough to fill him with bone-chilling terror. He didn't dare to contemplate that possibility, a possibility that would shatter him completely. To distract himself, he grabbed the remote and turned on the television. A news report from a few days ago was playing. He leaned back on the sofa, rubbing his tired eyes. Suddenly, a familiar face appeared on the screen. He shot upright, his eyes wide, only to see her fall to the ground, lifeless. Ethan's mind went blank. The reporter's voice continued in the background. "A few days ago, on North Street, a young woman collapsed from a sudden illness. She showed no signs of life before she could be transported to the hospital. This incident serves as a reminder to everyone to pay close attention to your health and seek medical attention for any discomfort. Alara was dead." She was really dead. Ethan covered his mouth and began to cough violently, as if trying to expel his own lungs. He stared at the fleeting image of her face on the screen, his heart tearing apart. It was that day. It was really on the day he told her to leave. In the final moments before she left, he had told her to never appear before him again. Ethan, oh Ethan, what have you done? He had lost the person who loved him most. No one would ever be as good to him as Alara had been. He staggered to his feet and picked up the diary he hadn't dared to open. Inside, Alara's neat, elegant handwriting filled the pages, line by line. "This is my first day in this world. I saw Ethan. It was him. I recognized him instantly. Ethan, don't worry. This time, I will make sure you have a happy ending." Reading the familiar script, Ethan's heart jolted. And as he processed the content, a tidal wave of shock crashed over him. Alara wasn't from this world. He turned the pages, one after another, his shock deepening with each line. It turned out that he was nothing more than the devoted second male lead in a novel. He had been written to love the female lead, Juliet, which was why he had been so obsessed with her all these years. And Alara, unable to bear seeing his lonely fate, had chosen to enter the world of the book to change his ending. But she had failed. Completely. Ethan collapsed onto the floor, memories flashing before his eyes. His feelings for Juliet had been an obsession, one he had mistaken for love. That was why, no matter how many times she hurt him, he always went back. He had been furious every time she betrayed him, yet the moment she returned, he couldn't control himself. It turned out he was the fated second male lead, destined to love Juliet. All these years, he could never even articulate what it was he loved about her. He had been a fool, a coward, led by the nose by the plot. Regret tore through him, his heart feeling as if it were being ripped to shreds. He stared at the thick diary, a testament to years of Alara's profound love for him. But now, he could never find her again. In the days that followed, Ethan didn't go to the office. He left all company matters to his assistant and the board. But for some reason, his assistant kept calling with reports. "Sir, about that partnership with Sterling Corp, they're insisting that Miss Vance handle it personally. They said she fought tooth and nail to land this deal, so she's the only one they'll work with." Ethan frowned, remembering the night of that negotiation. He had left halfway through to take Juliet's call. He never knew that Alara had managed to close the deal all by herself. His voice was hoarse. "Alara closed the deal." His assistant replied from the other end. "Yes, sir. I heard that to get it done, she ended up in the hospital that same night." Those partners from Sterling are a tough crowd. Miss Vance drank nearly 10 bottles of liquor to get those old sharks to finally agree. "Sir, should you come in personally, or should I try to contact Miss Vance? I've called her several times, but she hasn't picked up." A sharp, twisting pain shot through Ethan's heart. He silently hung up the phone and slumped onto the sofa. That night, she had called him so many times, but he hadn't answered a single one. Later, someone from the hospital had called, telling him Alara had alcohol poisoning and needed him to sign off on her treatment. But he had just managed to calm Juliet down. After a moment's hesitation, he had chosen Juliet. How much despair must she have felt when she heard him tell the doctor to have her contact someone else? She had come to this unfamiliar world for him. He was the only family she had. "Ethan, oh, Ethan, you are the biggest bastard in the world." He slammed his fist onto the glass coffee table. The shattering glass sliced open his knuckles and blood poured out. He stared at the wound but felt no pain. When Alara left, she must have bled this much too. How much pain was she in? Ethan collapsed onto the sofa, leaving the wound exposed. It was as if by feeling more pain himself, he could somehow lessen the agony in his heart. He lay there all night. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Ethan had no intention of answering, but the person outside was persistent, the ringing grating on his nerves. He reluctantly got up and opened the door. Juliet stood there, her eyes red. "Ethan, I'm sorry." He had lost count of how many times Juliet had appeared before him like this over the years. Every other time, he would have gently led her inside, showering her with care and comfort. But now, looking at her pitiful expression, Ethan felt not a single ounce of pity. He stared at her, his face a blank mask. "What do you want?" Juliet, who had never been treated with such coldness by him, was taken aback. She recovered after a moment and said, "Ethan, I came to apologize." Ethan's voice remained frigid. "You don't need to apologize to me." Because now, he no longer cared. Thinking he had forgiven her as usual, Juliet wiped her tears and walked into the house, chattering as she went. "Oh, Ethan, I'm so glad you're not mad at me. I was so scared of losing you. You're my best friend. You're always there for me. This time, I've really seen the light. Julian and I are just not meant to be." Ethan stood behind her, watching her woodenly, a flicker of impatience in his eyes. She used to complain about Julian just like this, and every time he would believe her, only to become a pawn in her game to make Julian jealous. He never understood why someone as proud as himself would let her use him time and again. After reading Alara's diary, he finally understood. It was all because of that damn novel, and Juliet was the fated female lead he was supposed to love. How utterly ridiculous. Juliet hadn't stopped talking since she walked in, constantly mentioning Julian's name, completely oblivious to Ethan's bleeding hand. "I'll never believe a word Julian says again. His world revolves around his company, his family, his friends, everyone but me. I gave up so much for him, I even hurt you, and for what? He hurts me over and over, and I keep going back like a moth to a flame. The only person who is ever good to me is you. Ethan, can you forgive me? Will you be with me?" After pouring her heart out, Juliet finally turned to face him. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation and confidence. It was as if she was certain that all she had to do was ask, and Ethan would agree. The silence was deafening. Ethan looked at her coldly, the love that had once filled his eyes now completely gone. He realized that he had loved Juliet for so many years, yet he had never known why. And all her empty promises to leave Julian for him were laughably transparent. How could he have been so foolish as to believe her? Ethan frowned, then calmly sat back down on the sofa. He looked at Juliet, his tone distant and icy. "I don't think I was clear enough. When I said I don't blame you, it's because you are no longer important to me." Juliet froze, then tugged at his sleeve pleadingly. "Ethan, don't be like this. I know I went too far this time. He mercilessly pulled his arm away, his gaze now holding a clear warning. "The person I love is Alara. From now on, whether you break up with Julian or fight with him, you don't need to inform me. And one more thing. We were young and made a lot of mistakes. Now that we've cleared the air, I think it's best we don't see each other again." Juliet, who had never seen this side of him, was still processing his words. She looked down and finally noticed his injured hand. She shot up to find a first aid kit, her words tumbling out in a panic. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. It's my fault. I didn't even see your hand was hurt. You have every right to be angry with me. Let me bandage it for you. Just wait a second." Ethan stood up impatiently and grabbed her arm. "Don't bother. I'll say this one last time. My life has nothing to do with you, and I don't want you interfering in my life anymore. And don't come here again. Alara wouldn't like seeing you." With that, he pulled her towards the door, pushed her outside, and slammed it shut. Juliet stood there, stunned, for a long time, slowly realizing that the Ethan who had always revolved around her had just rejected her. She pounded on the door, apologizing over and over. But no matter how much she begged, Ethan remained unmoved. Finally, exhausted, she gave up and left. Inside, Ethan stood by the window, his gaze distant, his thoughts a million miles away. When Alara woke up, the first person she saw was her best friend of many years, Sasha. Sasha was shaking her frantically, on the verge of tears. "Alara, wake up. Alara." Alara opened her eyes and stared at her distraught friend, her mind struggling to catch up. Was she back in the real world? So, even though she had failed to change Ethan's fate, she had paid her price in that world and was finally allowed to return. But where was she? Alara looked around at the stark white room, confused. "What happened to me? Where am I?" Sasha placed a hand on Alara's forehead, then on her own, a puzzled look on her face. "You don't have a fever. Alara, did you lose your memory? Do you know who I am?" She squeezed Sasha's hand and shook her head. "Of course I know you, Sasha. I don't remember what happened before I passed out." "What happened?" Relieved that she was recognized, Sasha let out a long breath. "What happened? You got so obsessed with some novel that you locked yourself in your apartment for days, no food, no water. The building manager got worried during a utility check and had to force the door open. When they found you, you were passed out at your desk. A little longer and you might not have made it." Alara was stunned. She had just been passed out at her desk for a few days. Then what about the 10 years she had spent in that other world? Was it all real or just a dream she had while unconscious? She didn't know. The thought of that experience, the thought of Ethan, made her heart ache as if it were about to split in two. It was all just a dream. In the end, she couldn't change a thing. She shook her head weakly, saying nothing more. Sasha sighed. "You rest up. I'm going to get you some breakfast, something light like porridge. You haven't eaten in days while you were out. You're going to make yourself sick. I don't know what kind of novel could get you this hooked. The characters in books are fictional. I think what you need is a real relationship to snap you out of it." With that, Sasha grabbed her bag and left. Alara pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the familiar, steady beat of her heart. She was really back in her own world. But the image of Ethan's face still made it hard to breathe. For 10 years, she had poured all of her love into him, only to leave with nothing but scars. Maybe Sasha was right. Maybe she needed to start a new relationship to finally feel what it was like to be loved. Since it was just malnutrition, Alara only stayed in the hospital overnight before being discharged. Returning to her familiar, yet strangely foreign apartment felt surreal. She picked up the novel again, her fingertips gently tracing the 2 characters of Ethan's name. A sharp pain shot through her hand. She clenched her fists, and tears fell uncontrollably, staining the pages. Loving one person for 10 years, it was something she had never imagined herself doing. But she had. In her real life, she had always been too cautious to love someone so recklessly. so she had poured everything she had into Ethan in that fictional world. Thinking back on those 10 years of unrequited love, Alara felt a deep sadness. Ethan was a good person. He just didn't love her. If she had the chance to do it all over again, she would never interfere in someone else's destiny. Thankfully, she had that chance now. That night, as she lay in bed, Ethan's face appeared in her mind's eye. He was looking at her, his eyes full of a sorrow so deep it threatened to drown her. Alara's heart seized, and she jolted awake, her forehead slick with sweat. She couldn't go on like this. Tomorrow, she would ask Sasha if she knew any nice guys she could introduce her to. Ethan hadn't slept in 3 days and 3 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind was flooded with images of Alara. When she was by his side every day, he hadn't realized it. But now that she was gone, he understood just how important she was to him. If he could do it all over again, he would hold onto her hand and never let go. He wished, more than anything, that fate would give him another chance. But did he have one? Ethan's world was pitch black. His body felt like it was floating, completely weightless. He hadn't eaten or had a drop of water in 3 days. Without Alara, it felt as if he had lost his reason to live. But where could he find her? He had lost her, and he would never find her again. Just then, he heard the sharp screech of tires. He was confused. He was in his house. Why would he hear a car? He tried to open his eyes, but he couldn't. The next thing he knew, a violent impact sent him crashing to the ground, a deafening ringing in his ears. "Sir, are you okay? Hello. Can you hear me?" With great effort, Ethan forced his eyes open. The first thing he saw was the face he had been dreaming of day and night. Alara stared at the handsome but dazed man sitting on the ground and waved a hand in front of his face. What was going on? She hadn't been driving that fast. How did this man suddenly appear in front of her car and get knocked down? The impact didn't seem that serious, but he wasn't saying anything. He was dressed in a tailored suit, so he didn't look like he needed the money. Was he trying to fake an injury for a payout? She was supposed to be meeting a date Sasha had set up for her. This delay was going to make her late. Just as Alara was about to call the police, the man suddenly threw his arms around her. "Alara?" Alara froze, realizing a moment too late that she was locked in his embrace. She shoved him away forcefully and took several steps back. "Who are you?" Ethan was stunned. He stood up, his tall frame reflected in the glass window of a nearby shop. The face staring back at him was that of a stranger, one he had never seen before. But the woman in front of him was unmistakably Alara, the Alara he knew and loved so deeply. Could it be, had he come to Alara's world? Ethan's gaze hardened as he calmed himself. He didn't know the full situation yet, he couldn't reveal his identity. After a moment, he looked down and apologized to Alara. "I'm sorry. I got a little carried away." Alara remained on guard, watching him warily. "How do you know my name? I don't know you." Ethan glanced at her car and pointed to a cartoon sticker on the dashboard. "Your name is on there." Alara looked back. It was a gift from Sasha, a sticker that said, "To the best Alara in the world." Seeing her continued suspicion, Ethan offered an explanation. "I'm sorry. The shock of being hit by a car must have scrambled my brain for a moment. I apologize for my behavior. Why don't we exchange contact information? I'd like to take you to dinner to make it up to you." Alara was still wary of this strange man. She took another step back. "That's not necessary. If you're okay, I should get going." Seeing her about to leave, Ethan felt a surge of panic. "Please, just give me your number. If I have any health issues after a checkup, I'll need to contact you." Alara paused. He had a point. Reluctantly, she took his phone and entered her number. "If you feel unwell, please contact me as soon as possible." With that, she got into her car, started the engine, and quickly drove away. After that little incident, Alara had lost her enthusiasm for the evening's date. But she had already agreed to it, so she had no choice but to go. Her mind kept replaying the encounter with the man she had hit. He had explained that he saw her name on the sticker, but why had he hugged her so suddenly? An absurd thought flashed through her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. It was impossible. Ethan was just a character in a book. How could he possibly come to the real world? But then again, she had transmigrated into his world, hadn't she? It was all too unbelievable. Even if he had crossed over, why would he hug her? He was so deeply in love with Juliet, willing to grow old alone for her. She must be overthinking things. Alara tried to reassure herself. On the street, Ethan stared at the unfamiliar face in the reflection, motionless. The man in the mirror had sharp features and exuded a powerful aura. He was clearly not an ordinary person. Perhaps he wouldn't have to figure out who he was. Someone would surely come looking for him. Just then, a man in a professional suit, flanked by a pair of bodyguards, hurried towards him. "Mr. Lancaster, are you all right?" As the assistant approached, the missing memories flooded into Ethan's mind. The body he now inhabited belonged to Alistair Lancaster, the CEO of the largest financial corporation in the city. He had been on his way to a conference when his car broke down. He had gotten out to walk the rest of the way when, somehow, he had been hit by Alara's car. It seemed fate had intervened. He had been given another chance to win her back, even if it wasn't in his own body. This time, he would hold on to her. This time, he would never let her down again. After her date, Alara couldn't stop thinking about the man she had hit with her car. He had an incredibly handsome face, but his aura was so cold and imposing that it screamed stay away. A man like that didn't seem the type to impulsively hug a strange woman. Just as she was lost in thought, Sasha called. "So, how was the date? I heard Miles Morgan was quite impressed with you." Hearing Miles's name, Alara was jolted back to the present. Damn it. Because of that incident, she had been distracted all evening and hadn't even paid much attention to what Miles looked like. She could only give a vague reply. "Oh, he was nice. A really good person." Sasha was thrilled. "That's great. Looks like you're on your way to finding someone. Don't forget to treat me to dinner when you do." Alara mumbled a few noncommittal words and hung up. She hadn't realized the lingering effect Ethan had on her. Even back in her own world, she thought of him constantly. Maybe she was just too idle, which was why she was so hung up on her feelings. It had been a while since she'd returned. It was time to get back to work. Fortunately, she hadn't let her skills rust over the past decade. As Ethan's assistant, her professional capabilities were outstanding. Now that she was back, she planned to do what she did best. She sent her resume to several well-known corporations and quickly received interview invitations. The first was for the largest financial firm in the city, the Lancaster Group. Alara went to bed early to prepare for the interview the next day. That night, she received a text from an unknown number. She never read messages from strangers, so she immediately moved it to her trash folder. The next morning, she got dressed and hurried to the Lancaster Group. The interview process had 3 rounds. After the first, she went to the cafe downstairs for a coffee and to cram some more details about the company. As she turned away from the counter, she wasn't paying attention and collided with someone walking towards her. The scalding coffee was about to splash all over her when the man suddenly shielded her with his body. Looking at the large, wet stain on his suit, Alara bowed repeatedly in apology. "I'm so sorry, are you okay?" She didn't dare to look up. The suit looked incredibly expensive, and she wasn't sure she could afford to replace it. The man calmly took out a handkerchief to wipe the stain, then asked with concern, "I'm fine. What about you?" His voice sounded familiar. She snapped her head up and her eyes met his. It was the man she had hit with her car. Alara's eyes widened, and she stumbled back at a loss for words. You, Alistair's lips curved into a faint smile. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" "Don't worry, I'm not here to ask for compensation. I was just passing by. It was a coincidence." Alara was stunned for a moment, but she quickly composed herself and apologized again. It was her fault both times. Even though his appearance was suspicious, she couldn't be rude. "That's not what I meant. I was just surprised to see you. I'm sorry, are you sure you weren't burned?" Alistair shook his head. "I'm fine. Are you here for an interview?" Alara looked down at the resume in her hand and gave a small smile. "Yes." Alistair nodded with a cryptic expression. "You'll get what you want." With that, he took his new coffee and walked out. Watching him leave, Alara couldn't shake the feeling of familiarity. He looked nothing like Ethan, and his demeanor was completely different, yet she still saw a shadow of Ethan in him. She thought she must be going crazy. The first round of interviews was over. The next step was the manager interview. She took her materials and went upstairs, only to be told by the receptionist that the interviews were over. They had already found a suitable candidate, so the second and third rounds were canceled. Alara was disappointed. This was her first job search since returning to her world, and she had already hit a wall. And she had really wanted to work at the Lancaster Group. She had heard that the CEO, Alastair Lancaster, was a ruthless workaholic, a style that suited her perfectly. She wanted a high-pressure job to distract herself, which was why she had applied. Now that her hopes were dashed, she would have to make other plans. As she was leaving, she got a call from HR. They asked her how soon she could start. She checked the number. It was definitely from the Lancaster Group. Me. But I thought you already found a suitable candidate. The person on the other end paused. We did. Our suitable candidate is you, Miss Vance. It felt like a dream. Alara couldn't believe her luck. After all, her resume wasn't particularly impressive. A company like the Lancaster Group would have countless applicants from top universities with extensive experience. And while she had been an assistant at Hawthorne Group for many years, she couldn't exactly put that experience on her resume. Alara was overjoyed and agreed to start the very next day. That night, she was too excited to sleep. She was up at the crack of dawn, dressed in professional attire, and at the office early. The HR representative who handled her onboarding repeatedly warned her that their CEO, Alastair Lancaster, was notoriously difficult to work for, a perfectionist who scrutinized every detail. She needed to be on her toes. After all, she was the 5th assistant they had hired that month. Alara nodded, clipped on her ID badge, and walked to the CEO's office. First things first, she had to greet her new boss. She knocked and entered. A tall, slender figure stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her. "Hello, Mr. Lancaster. I'm your new assistant." At the sound of her voice, the man slowly turned around. Staring at the familiar face, Alara's eyes widened in shock. It was him, the man she had hit with her car, and then spilled coffee on. Alara stared at him for a long moment before it finally sank in. This man was now her direct supervisor. Her boss. Alastair handed her a folder. "I told you your wish would come true." She was stunned, instantly understanding that she had been hired because of him. But why? They were strangers. Why would he go out of his way to choose her? After a moment's thought, she asked, "Mr. Lancaster, may I ask why you chose me to be your assistant?" Alastair's lips curved into a faint smile. "I don't need a reason for what I do." Pressing the issue would be impolite. She had no right to question his decisions. She took the folder and quietly left. As she stepped out, a few senior employees gathered around her, eager for information. "How's Mr. Lancaster's mood today?" Alara thought for a moment. "He seems to be in a good mood." She didn't really know him, but based on his pleasant demeanor towards her, she assumed he was in good spirits. The group seemed to let out a collective sigh of relief. Alara asked, confused, "Are you all that afraid of Mr. Lancaster?" They exchanged glances. One of them peeked down the hallway before lowering their voice to a whisper. "Ask anyone in this company who isn't afraid of Mr. Lancaster. He's known as the devil. If you make even the smallest mistake and he catches it, you're done for." They were about to say more when the office door creaked open. The group froze and scattered like birds. After a moment, no one came out. It must have just been the wind. Alara found it amusing. Based on her brief interactions with Alastair Lancaster, he didn't seem as terrifying as they made him out to be. Either he was a master of disguise, or they were exaggerating. After familiarizing herself with her duties, she quickly got to work. She wanted to get up to speed as quickly as possible, so she stayed long after everyone else had gone home. Time flew by. When she finally looked up from her work, the clock showed it was already 10 o'clock. It was late. She hurriedly packed her things, ready to leave. Just then, the door to the CEO's office opened, and Alastair walked out, carrying a takeout container. "You haven't eaten, have you? I ordered some food. You should have some too." Alara was about to refuse, but she had already been on his bad side twice. To reject his kindness now would seem ungrateful. She nodded and went to the break room to get 2 glasses of water. The dim lighting of the office cast an intimate glow. Alara walked to the door, flipped on the main lights, and then hurried back to open the food containers. She was, in fact, starving. Inside the containers were 4 dishes: spicy stir-fried pork, steamed shrimp, scrambled eggs with tomatoes, and braised beef. Alara froze. These were all her favorite dishes. Back when she was Ethan's assistant, they would often order these exact 4 dishes when they worked late. She looked at him, surprised, but his expression was unreadable. "What's wrong? My executive assistant ordered randomly. Is it not to your liking?" So his assistant had ordered it. Alara breathed a small sigh of relief and shook her head. I used to love these dishes. Alastair looked up. Used to? You don't like them anymore? Alara smiled. People's tastes change. The same goes for food you've had too many times. Alastair said nothing more and quietly ate his meal. The dishes were all extra spicy, just how Alara liked them, but Alastair only ate a few of the steamed shrimp. It seemed he couldn't handle spicy food. Alara couldn't understand why his assistant would order spicy dishes if he couldn't eat them. And in her memory, there was someone else who couldn't eat spicy food. The meal was an uncomfortable one. As soon as it was over, she quickly packed up and left. Behind her, Alastair watched her hurry away, a mix of relief and worry in his heart. He was relieved that she was so cautious and distant with other men, but worried that if she found out he was Ethan, she would never forgive him or accept him. And his very presence here had displaced the real Alastair Lancaster. When would he return? Back home, Alara couldn't stop thinking about the strange events of the past few days. If Alastair Lancaster was truly as unapproachable as everyone said, why would he be so thoughtful as to order dinner and invite her to eat with him? Alara knew her own worth. She was attractive, but not so much that a man like Alastair would go out of his way to be kind to her. She decided to take things one step at a time and see what happened. The next day at the office, Alara was informed that she would be accompanying Alastair to a cocktail party that evening. She had attended countless events like this when she was with Ethan, but she was surprised that Alastair would take a new employee who had only been there for a few days. An assistant was the person closest to the CEO. Alastair's explanation was that as a new employee, she needed to gain more experience. Alara didn't argue. She wasn't afraid of attending major events, but going with Alastair made her uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something strange about him. The man she saw seemed to be a completely different person from the one her colleagues described. He was mysterious, moody, and unusually gentle with her. It all felt off. Despite her doubts, she changed into her evening gown and got into his car. She had to admit he was incredibly handsome. Dressed in a black, custom-tailored suit, he radiated power. His chiseled features were so perfect they could have been carved from stone, making one feel inadequate just by looking at him. No wonder that, despite his notoriously difficult personality, countless women still flocked to him. The people at the company both respected and feared him, and many admired him. Sitting beside him, Alara could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne. The car pulled up to the grand entrance of the Marigold Hotel, and they got out together. For practicality, she had chosen a simple yet elegant black slip dress that fell just past her knees. It was only after putting it on that she realized the back was completely open. It was too late to change, so she decided to just make do for the night. As she started to walk, she felt a weight on her shoulders. She looked over and saw that Alastair had taken off his jacket and draped it over her. Alara instinctively tried to take it off, but Alastair was faster. He looked at her, his eyes dark, his voice firm. There are a lot of media here tonight. Do you think it's appropriate for an assistant to be dressed like that? She frowned. On second thought, he had a point. Fortunately, both their outfits were black, so it didn't look too out of place. When they entered the ballroom, everyone turned to greet Alastair, raising their glasses to him. In this circle, Alastair Lancaster held absolute authority. He glanced at Alara, and she immediately understood, fetching him a glass of champagne. Alara watched him effortlessly down glass after glass, and her mind drifted back to the business dinners she had attended with Ethan. His stomach was weak, so he couldn't drink much. Most of the time, she would drink for him, but she was a lightweight and would always end up drunk after these events. Back then, Ethan only had eyes for Juliet. One phone call from her, and he would abandon Alara without a second thought. Over time, she had come to accept that these dinners meant she would have to drink. Lost in thought, she had already picked up a glass and stepped in front of Alastair. Just as she was about to raise it to her lips, Alastair frowned, smoothly took his empty glass and placed it in her hand, then took her full glass as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Get me another drink. You'll be driving me home later, so you shouldn't drink. Alara stared at the empty glass in her hand, momentarily confused. Hadn't he brought her here to get her accustomed to drinking at these events? Why was he being so considerate? Besides, he had a driver. Why would she need to drive? Alara didn't ask any questions. She obediently got a glass of juice and sat in a corner, waiting for the party to end. She didn't know anyone there, so aside from watching people dance, there wasn't much for her to do. Just as she was getting bored and about to step outside for some fresh air, a man holding a glass of wine blocked her path. "I don't believe we've met. Would you be interested in a dance?" Alara was taken aback. She looked at the man's leering eyes and frowned, but this was a formal event and she couldn't be too rude. She forced a smile. "I'm sorry, I don't know how to dance." The man nodded but didn't give up. "If you don't dance, then how about a drink with me?" He reached out to grab her. He was clearly drunk and his grip was strong. Alara stumbled, nearly falling. Once she regained her balance, she forcefully pulled away. "I don't drink. If you're looking for a drinking partner, you should find someone else." She turned to leave, but the man grabbed her by the dress and pulled her into his arms. "Don't play hard to get. No woman dares to refuse a drink from me. Drink this, and we'll call it even." Alara looked into his lewd, dangerous eyes and hesitated. She was just Alistair's assistant, a new hire at that. They had no real connection, and she couldn't expect him to come to her rescue. It was better not to cause trouble. One drink wouldn't hurt. She shouldn't get into a conflict over this. With that thought, she struggled out of his grasp, took the glass from his hand, and drank it in one go. "There. I've had my drink. Can I go now?" The man smirked at her but said nothing. Just as Alara turned to leave, her head suddenly began to feel heavy and dizzy. She steadied herself, her eyelids growing heavy. Something was wrong. She wasn't a good drinker, but she definitely wasn't this much of a lightweight. Could it be? Had he drugged her drink? A wave of panic washed over her. She tried to run, but her legs felt as if they were filled with lead, too heavy to move. From behind her, she heard the man's triumphant voice. "There's no one I want that I can't get." She knew she was in trouble. She tried to call for help, but no sound would come out. Alistair was across the room, surrounded by people, completely oblivious to her situation. Alara was frantic. In the moment before she collapsed, she swept her arm across a nearby table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass drew the attention of those nearby. The man quickly wrapped his arm around her and explained to the crowd with a smile. "My girlfriend has had a little too much to drink. Excuse us, I'm taking her home." He started to lead her out. Just as Alara was about to give up all hope, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Let her go." The man turned and met Alistair's gaze. He flinched in fear for a moment, then quickly put on a fawning smile. "Mr. Lancaster, my girlfriend is drunk. I need to take her home." Alistair's dark eyes glinted with a sharp, cold light, like a dagger aimed straight at the man. He spoke through gritted teeth, each word laced with menace. "Oh, and since when did my person become your girlfriend?" Alistair's person. The man was clearly stunned by his words, frozen in place for a long moment. He was stuck, not knowing whether to hold on to Alara or let her go. Alistair walked towards him, step by step, and then scooped Alara into his arms. As he turned to leave, his bodyguards surrounded the man. "Mr. Lancaster, what should we do with him?" Hearing this, the man dropped to his knees in terror. "Mr. Lancaster, I was blind. I was wrong to offend this lady, please. Forgive me, I'll never do it again." Alistair, holding Alara, walked away without a backward glance. "Take him to the police. After that, I don't want to see him in this city ever again." Alistair carried her straight to the car. Seeing her flushed face, he felt as if a knife were twisting in his gut. He couldn't imagine what would have happened to Alara if he had been a moment later. Damn it, all Alara was barely conscious. Her body felt like it was on fire. The man holding her smelled familiar, a faint, clean scent that made her feel safe. Suddenly, a cool hand touched her cheek. The sensation was so soothing that she instinctively leaned into it. Feeling her press closer, Alistair's hand trembled slightly. This was the first time since becoming Alistair that he had been this close to her. He looked down at her, her eyes closed, her long lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. Her hands were clutching his arm tightly. Suddenly, she grabbed his hand and whispered a name. "Ethan!" In that instant, Alistair froze, a storm of emotions, elation, shock, joy coursing through him, making him tremble. He gently pulled her closer. "Alara, say my name again, please." But she just shifted in her sleep and fell silent. Alistair smiled faintly. What was he hoping for? Just hearing her say his name once was enough for now. When they arrived at his mansion, Alistair personally carried her upstairs. He called for a maid to change her clothes, clean her face, and settle her in the guest room. He barely slept that night, sitting by her bedside, watching over her. He was no longer Ethan. To her, he was a complete stranger. All the privileges Ethan had once had were gone. His only path forward was to win her over with his sincerity. When Alara woke up, it was already the next afternoon. The drug was potent, and her head was still pounding. She opened her eyes and realized she was in a completely unfamiliar place. A sense of dread washed over her. Had the man from last night taken her? Just as she was about to panic, the door opened. Alistair, dressed in casual loungewear, walked towards her. "You're awake. Are you feeling unwell anywhere?" Alara was stunned for a moment before she realized she was in Alistair's home. Her memory of the previous night ended the moment she collapsed. She had no idea what had happened after. Still worried, she asked tentatively, "My head hurts, but other than that, I'm fine. Mr. Lancaster, were you the one who found me last night?" Alistair's lips curved into a smile. He knew what she was worried about and explained, "You were drugged last night and almost taken away. Luckily, you were smart enough to break those glasses and get my attention. I didn't know where you lived, and leaving you at a hotel didn't seem right, so I took the liberty of bringing you here. It's the weekend, so you can sleep in. I'll have my driver take you home later. Your clothes were dirty, so I had the maids change you. They've been washed and dried." Hearing his explanation, Alara finally relaxed, but she still didn't understand. She was just his assistant. Why was he going to such lengths for her? Then she reconsidered. She was, after all, his employee. If something had happened to her under his watch, it would reflect poorly on him. The great CEO of the Lancaster Group couldn't even protect his own assistant. That would be a joke. Having reasoned it out, Alara stopped dwelling on it, changed her clothes, and went downstairs. When the maids saw her, they gathered around her, whispering, "Miss Vance, when are you and the young master getting married?" The question completely floored Alara. Her face flushed as she tried to explain. "What marriage? I'm just Mr. Lancaster's assistant. I was here last night because I had too much to drink. It's not what you think." The maids exchanged knowing glances. "Miss Vance, there's no need to be shy. We've been working for the Lancaster family for over a decade, and we've never seen the young master bring a woman home before. You're the first." "An assistant, you say? He's had female assistants before, but they were never allowed past the living room, let alone upstairs. And yesterday, our young master carried you upstairs himself." They huddled together, smiling at her. "Miss Vance, our young master doesn't get close to women easily. He's a very devoted man. I think you two are destined to be together." Alara's face was beet red. She didn't know how to explain, so she just made an excuse about having to leave and rushed out. The maids told her Alistair had arranged for a driver to take her, but she refused and fled the mansion. As she was leaving, she noticed that the courtyard was filled with jasmine flowers. And jasmine happened to be her favorite. During her 10 years in the novel, she had brought a fresh bouquet of jasmine to Ethan's house almost every day. Later, because Juliet preferred roses, she had stopped. How strange. A man as cold as him, why would he plant such delicate flowers? Alara left in a hurry, trying to piece together the events of the previous night. But her head hurt too much to think, so she eventually gave up. After resting at home for 2 days, she returned to the office. As she sat down, she saw breakfast waiting for her on her desk. It was a perfectly steamed crab roe bun and a bowl of shrimp, Kanji her favorite breakfast combination. Besides Sasha, no one else knew this. Could Sasha have ordered it for her? She opened the containers, took a picture, and sent it to her friend. "Thanks for the breakfast, beautiful." A moment later, Sasha replied, "I didn't order you breakfast. Must be a secret admirer. And they know your tastes pretty well, Alara. You sly fox, I've known you for over 20 years. And you tell this guy your secrets after less than a month. Spill, who is he?" Alara stared at the steaming breakfast, a sense of unease washing over her. Besides Sasha, only one other person knew. Ethan. He knew she loved jasmine, that she liked shrimp congee and crab roe buns for breakfast, that she loved spicy food. But he was just a character in a book. He could never come to the real world. Even if he did, where would he be? Alara lost her appetite. She threw the breakfast in the trash. On her way back, she overheard some colleagues talking in the break room. "That Alara Vance got in through connections, right? I heard she only had one interview before she became the CEO's assistant." No way that wasn't because of connections. Who knows who she bribed to get in? And look how she puts on airs, going to that gala with the CEO right after she started. I'm telling you, I heard the CEO personally drove her home after the party. You don't think she? No way the CEO has such high standards. Why would he be interested in a lowly assistant? Even if he did drive her home, it was probably just a boss looking out for his subordinate. Exactly. All the socialites in the city are throwing themselves at him, and he won't even give them the time of day. You think he'd look at her? So, in their eyes, she had gotten her job through special connections. Alara sighed. Once they had that idea in their heads, it would be hard to change their minds. It was strange, though. This Alistair Lancaster was treating her differently for no apparent reason, and it was causing her nothing but trouble. She decided not to explain herself. She wasn't here to make friends anyway. She quietly returned to her desk and started her work for the day. In the following days, Alistair didn't seem to treat her any differently than usual. Aside from being unusually gentle with her, there was no special treatment. A few days later, he suddenly asked her to book a flight to France and informed her that she would be accompanying him on a month-long business trip. Alara was hesitant. Paris had always been a dream destination for her. She had once had the chance to go with Ethan, but Juliet had ruined those plans. But to spend a whole month alone with Alistair in a foreign country, wouldn't that just fuel the office gossip? After thinking it over, she realized that her reputation was already tarnished in their eyes. Why should she give up a learning opportunity for their sake? With that, she booked the flights and hotel. When they arrived in Paris, they dropped their luggage at the hotel. A short while later, Alistair knocked on her door. "Change your clothes and come with me, nothing too formal." Hearing his cool voice through the door, Alara sighed. He hadn't given her a choice. But she was here for work after all, so she shouldn't have expected anything else. She changed into a simple dress, quickly freshened up, and went out. A car was already waiting for them at the hotel entrance. She sat in the back, gazing at the flower fields outside the window. "Mr. Lancaster, where are we going?" Alistair's deep eyes met hers. "To the lavender fields." Alara was taken aback. She remembered that their itinerary for the month had no mention of a trip to the lavender fields. "Are we meeting someone, Mr. Lancaster?" His expression remained impassive. "I just wanted to see them for myself. We're not meeting anyone. Or do you not want to go?" How could she not want to go? It was a wish she had made years ago. But back then, her wish had been to go with Ethan. She had so many regrets from her time with him. Alara shook her head and said nothing more. Since becoming Alistair's assistant, he had rarely spoken to her, but his actions were always perplexing. On their first day in France, he was taking her to a lavender field. A man like him didn't seem the type to drive for an hour just to admire flowers. They drove in silence. When they got out of the car, they could see a vast, breathtaking sea of lavender. The endless expanse of purple covered the land, a beauty that was almost suffocating. Alara walked into the fields, closing her eyes to savor the moment. When she opened them again, she realized Alistair was gone. She was completely alone. A wave of panic washed over her as she walked forward. "Mr. Lancaster? Mr. Lancaster, are you still here?" There was no response. Her heart began to race. She quickened her pace, heading back the way she came. As she passed a large patch of lavender, she saw him standing in the distance. For a fleeting moment, he looked exactly like Ethan. They had completely different faces, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the man before her was Ethan. She unconsciously walked towards him, calling his name. "Ethan?" The man's body stiffened. When he turned around, it was Alistair's face. She snapped back to reality. "Mr. Lancaster, I didn't see you for a moment. I thought you had already left." Alistair frowned slightly. "Why would I leave you behind?" There was a moment of silence before he asked, "Who did you just call me?" "Ethan." A pang of pain shot through Alara's heart. She shook her head. "I just mistook you for someone else for a second. I'm sorry." Alistair asked tentatively, "Is that person a friend of yours? Do you care about him a lot?" Alara frowned. What was Ethan to her? She had never really thought about it. She had been the one to delude herself into thinking she could change his fate, only to end up with nothing. Were they friends, or just colleagues? She couldn't say. After all, Ethan wasn't even a real person. How could she explain her relationship with a fictional character? After a long pause, she finally answered, "He's not important. It's not worth talking about." "It's getting late. When are we heading back?" Alistair's expression visibly fell. He was silent for a moment before saying flatly, "Let's go." When they got back to the hotel, Alara collapsed onto the bed and fell into a deep sleep. It was strange, so very strange. Every little detail about Alistair Lancaster was suspicious. And what was even more absurd was that, on multiple occasions, she had felt that Alistair was Ethan. She must be possessed to be so fixated on Ethan that she was seeing him in other people. Alara knew she couldn't go on like this. She had to find a way to forget him, and fast. Over the next few days, Alistair's behavior seemed to return to normal. Aside from their necessary meetings with clients, he gave Alara the rest of the time to herself. Walking through the unfamiliar streets, Alara couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. She remembered the time she was supposed to travel with Ethan. She had packed her bags and prepared everything they would need. But at the airport, one phone call from Juliet, and he had abandoned her without a second thought. She had sat alone at the airport all day, not leaving until it was dark. Even though so much time had passed, the memory was still excruciatingly painful. Ethan had hurt her so much. If he were to appear before her now, could she accept him as she had before? Alara scoffed at the thought. Not only was it impossible for Ethan to appear before her, but he would never choose her over Juliet. She was worrying for nothing. It was time to let him go, to let him fade from her memory. She would meet new people, fall in love, get married, and have children. After returning from France, Alara immediately called Sasha. "You said you were going to set me up on a blind date. What happened?" Sasha, who was still half asleep, shrieked with excitement when she heard Alara's request. "Are you serious? You've finally seen the light?" Alara laughed. "Of course I'm serious. Completely serious," Sasha was ecstatic. "Okay, I'll arrange it. You'll meet him tomorrow night and remember to dress up," Alara agreed and hung up. The next morning, she spent a long time searching her closet before settling on a simple white sleeveless dress. She put on some light makeup and headed to the office. The date was in the evening, so she would have enough time to get there after work. Just as she was about to leave, Alistair called her into his office. "I need this contract translated. Finish it and leave it on my desk." Alara nodded. As she was about to leave, Alistair stopped her. "Do you have a date tonight?" She was confused. "I'm meeting a friend. Is there something you need, sir?" Alistair's eyes suddenly turned cold. "Male or female?" She frowned unconsciously. "That's my personal business. I don't see how it concerns you, Mr. Lancaster." Realizing he had overstepped, Alistair's gaze flickered away. He paused, then said, "Translate the contract for me now. I need it immediately." Alara didn't know why he had suddenly changed his tune, but his calm expression gave nothing away. She could only agree, then stepped outside to call Sasha. "I'm so sorry, Sasha. Something came up at work and I have to work late. I can't make it tonight. Maybe we can reschedule?" Sasha was indignant. "What's wrong with your boss? Pulling this at the last minute? Finding a husband is more important than work. Tell your boss you have a blind date tonight and you'll do the work tomorrow." Alara had to laugh. "You're killing me." "I can't say that. Postponing work for a blind date. You want me to get fired?" Just then, she heard a sound at the door. Not daring to say more, she quickly hung up. Alistair stood before her, his aura dark and heavy, his eyes smoldering with what looked like anger. "You're going on a blind date?" Faced with his accusatory tone, Alara was baffled. "Yes, is there a problem?" Alistair stared at her, his eyes practically shooting fire. But after a long, tense silence, he said nothing, simply turned and strode away. Alara had no idea what he was so angry about, or why her going on a blind date would provoke such a reaction. It seemed her colleagues were right about him. He was moody and unpredictable. The pleasant demeanor he had shown her before was just a facade. Not daring to delay any longer, Alara worked for several more hours to finish the translation. By the time she left, it was already late. She took a cab home. As she was walking past the garden to her building, a familiar shadow emerged from the darkness, grabbed her, and pinned her against a wall. Her heart pounded in her chest. In the dim moonlight, she saw her attacker's face. Alistair, she struggled, but he held her tighter. "Let go of me, Mr. Lancaster. What are you doing?" Alistair's eyes were bloodshot, as if he were holding back an immense force. After a long moment, he finally released her, his voice laced with a desperate plea. "Can you please not go on blind dates? Don't see other men." Alara froze. She looked at his handsome face, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Alistair leaned in to kiss her, but she turned her head and his lips met her cheek. She pushed him away, her voice as cold as ice. "Ethan, it's you, isn't it?" Alistair's body went rigid, as if he had been turned to stone. Alara stepped past him, refusing to look at him. "When did you get here?" Alistair leaned against the wall, his body limp. After a long pause, he answered, "The day of the car accident." Alara thought back to that day, when she had hit a stranger who had then held her tightly and called her name. It all made sense now. And her subsequent encounters with him at the coffee shop, his hiring her as his assistant, ordering her favorite food, taking her to the lavender fields in France. It had all been intentional. Alistair turned to face her. "When did you know that Alistair was me?" She looked down, replaying the events in her mind, and shook her head. "I suspected it from the first time you ordered me food. How could it be a coincidence that you ordered the exact 4 dishes I love most? Then, when you took me to your home, the maid said you were like a different person since you met me. And the jasmine flowers in your garden, I was almost certain then. What confirmed it for me was the business trip to France. Our first stop was a lavender field that had nothing to do with work. Ethan, what are you trying to do?" Hearing her recount all the details, Alistair was overwhelmed with a mix of emotions. All this time, he had been afraid she would recognize him, and at the same time, afraid she wouldn't. He had wanted to care for her, so he had done so in small, quiet ways, never daring to tell her that he was Ethan. The Ethan of the past had hurt her so much. He wasn't sure if she would ever want him by her side again. He had been overjoyed when he first saw her. She wasn't dead. She had simply returned to her own world. He still had a chance to make things right. He could make it up to her. He would do anything to make her happy. He bought her favorite foods, kept her by his side, took her to the flower fields she had always wanted to see. But just as he thought they could start over, slowly and carefully, she had told him she was going on a blind date. For the first time, he had felt fear, true panic. He had always been a smart man, excelling in his studies and his career. Even in this strange new world, he had quickly adapted. But the moment he learned Alara was going to see another man, he had lost all composure. He couldn't think of a better solution than the clumsy tactic of using work to keep her from her date. But he knew that was only a temporary fix. He couldn't keep her trapped like that forever. That was why he had recklessly waited for her outside her apartment, begging her not to leave him, to give him a little more time. But he never imagined that she had known who he was all along. Alistair turned and took her hand, his voice gentle and pleading. "Alara, I'm sorry. I was wrong before. I didn't cherish you. Please give me another chance." He held her hand tightly, as if it were his entire world. "The truth is, I fell in love with you a long time ago. It was the plot of the novel that made me push you away time and again, but I'm free of it now. I'm no longer a puppet. I can choose who I love. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." If only he had said these words sooner. Alara shook her head with a bitter smile and pulled her hand away. "I don't blame you. It wasn't your fault that you loved Juliet. And it wasn't your fault that I chose to be good to you, to give you everything. I did it willingly. But we can't be together." Alistair stared at her, his heart sinking. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if to keep her from disappearing. "Don't leave me, Alara. I don't believe you've forgotten me. I won't give up. I will never give up." Alara's brow furrowed. She pushed him away forcefully, her eyes devoid of emotion. "Yes, I haven't completely forgotten you, but I have decided to start a new life. Ethan, you don't belong in this world. You could disappear at any moment, just like I disappeared from your world. Have you ever thought about what happened to the real Alistair Lancaster? One day, he might come back to his body and replace you. I know you feel regret and guilt, which is why you came here, but I've already decided to let go. Please, you should let go too." With that, she turned and walked away without another word. Alistair had never seen her so resolute. She had always been so accommodating, so willing to do anything for him. She would never have left him first. But now, the light in her eyes when she looked at him was gone. Could it be? Did she really not love him anymore? No, it couldn't be. She had waited for him for 10 years. A love that deep couldn't just vanish overnight. Whether she accepted him or not, he would do everything in his power to make it up to her. Alara barely slept that night. Though she had suspected Alistair's identity for a while, Having it confirmed made it impossible for her to face him calmly. The man she had loved for 10 years, the man she had watched grow from a boy to a man, the man she had given all her love to. Even though she had decided not to repeat the past, she couldn't continue to work with him as if nothing had happened. She made a decision. She would resign from the Lancaster Group. The next morning, she got dressed and left her apartment. After giving the cab driver her destination, she leaned back and closed her eyes. As the car moved, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. She opened her eyes and saw that they had completely deviated from the route and were now driving along a deserted riverbank. She frantically tried to open the door, but the driver sped up, throwing her back in her seat. He then stopped the car and dragged her out. Alara stared at the strange man, completely bewildered. Suddenly, a group of men emerged from the shadows and surrounded her. "Is this Alistair Lancaster's woman?" "That's her. I've seen him drive her home himself several times. I heard he even took her to France with him." "Good. Alistair Lancaster drove us to bankruptcy. Let's see how he likes a taste of his own medicine." Hearing their words, Alara understood. The original Alistair had been a ruthless businessman who had made many enemies. But he was a loner with no close friends or family, so his enemies had no one to target. Now, because of her closeness to him, they were using her to get to him. Before Alara could speak, the leader of the group grabbed her by the chin and slapped her hard across the face. "Hit her, then take pictures and send them to Lancaster. Let's see if he's worried then. Tell him to bring $10 million alone to the location we specify. If he dares to call the police, this bitch dies." With that, they tied Alara up and threw her into a nearby abandoned warehouse. Her body ached as if it had been broken. She struggled to sit up and surveyed her surroundings. There were guards at both the front and back entrances. There was no chance of escape, and with her hands and feet bound, she couldn't even try to free herself. Was she going to die here? That night, she heard a commotion outside. Soon, someone came in, grabbed her, and dragged her out. On the deserted riverbank, Alistair stood alone. He was holding a suitcase. When he saw Alara, bruised and battered, a furious fire ignited in his eyes. "I'm warning you, let her go," the leader of the kidnappers sneered, pulled a knife from his pocket, and pressed it to her cheek. "Warning us? With what? Put the money down, then smash your hands with a rock, and we'll give you the woman. Otherwise, for every minute you delay, we'll cut her face." He made a motion as if to slice her cheek. Alara was trembling, the cold steel of the blade against her skin raising goosebumps. She had never been so terrified. No matter what decision Alistair made, she was scared. Alistair's sharp gaze was fixed on her, his expression as dark as a storm cloud. He threw the suitcase on the ground, then bent down and picked up a rock. Seeing him raise the rock, Alara's heart leaped into her throat. "Don't, you can't." She would rather be hurt herself than see him destroy his hands for her. The man holding her tightened his grip on her neck and laughed menacingly. "So you know what it feels like to be in pain. You know what it's like to be worried. This is what you rich people deserve." A dangerous glint flashed in Alistair's eyes. Without hesitation, he brought the rock down hard on the back of his hand. "Let her go. I'll give you everything you want. But if you dare to hurt her again, I will make you wish you were never born." The man was momentarily stunned by the intensity in Alistair's eyes. He stammered, You keep smashing. If you don't stop, we won't let her go." Alistair raised the rock again and brought it down with crushing force. His hand was already broken and bleeding, but he bit his lip and only let out a muffled grunt. Watching this, Alara's heart felt like it was being torn apart. Tears streamed down her face. The moment her ropes were loosened, she ran towards him, crying. "Stop, Ethan, stop!" Hearing her call his name again, Alistair looked up, a flicker of joy in his eyes. But in that instant, the man with the knife lunged at her from behind. Without a thought, Alistair threw himself in front of her, pulling her into his arms and turning his back to the attacker. With the sickening sound of a blade piercing flesh, Alistair's face went deathly pale. His full weight collapsed onto her, and they both fell to the ground. The wail of police sirens filled the air, along with the frantic shouts of his bodyguards calling his name. Alara's tears fell like broken pearls. She held him tightly, terrified he would disappear from her world forever. "Ethan, are you still there?" His head rested on her shoulder, his warm breath on her neck. "I'm here," she sobbed, 1,000 words caught in her throat. Alistair gently wiped away her tears, his gaze already hazy. I'm sorry, Alara, for all the times I left you behind. Don't worry, I will never leave you for someone else again. Trust me. Alara looked at his pale face, her heart shattering. I trust you, I trust you. Don't talk. The paramedics are almost here. We're going to the hospital. You're going to be okay, Alistair coughed, his voice weak. If I don't say it now, I might not get another chance. Alara, I have to go. Maybe fate brought me to you in someone else's body so I could find my redemption. Knowing you're okay, that gives me peace. I can feel another consciousness taking over my body. The real Alistair must be coming back. Alara, I don't know if I'll ever see you again. You have to be happy. As long as you're happy, that's all that matters. Remember, I will never love anyone else. I only love you. Only you. Alara was crying too hard to speak. By the time she could form a reply, Alistair had lost consciousness. All the kidnappers were arrested. She and Alistair were rushed to the hospital. She only had minor injuries. Alistair's fingers were broken, and the stab wound was deep, but thankfully, it hadn't hit any vital organs. In the days that followed, she never left his side, terrified something would happen to him. 3 days later, Alistair finally woke up. Alara was holding a bowl of his favorite shrimp congee, so emotional she was on the verge of tears. You're awake, Alistair said nothing, just stared at her for a long time. His gaze was cold, so cold it was as if he were a different person. In that instant, Alara understood. The man before her was the real Alistair Lancaster, not Ethan. She concealed the sorrow in her eyes, put down the bowl, and quietly left the room. Over the next few days, she resumed her role as his assistant, taking care of him with professional detachment. Just as the rumors said, Alistair was cold, decisive, and ruthless. Working for him meant that one small mistake could get you fired. In a way, Alara was relieved. He didn't remember what had happened, and he wouldn't see her as anything other than an employee. She could finally just do her job. But sometimes, when she thought of Ethan, a sharp pain would still pierce her heart. One day, she found herself rereading the novel where Ethan was the fated second male lead. As she flipped through the pages, she realized the author had changed the story. In this version, Ethan had completely cut ties with Juliet, but he never found anyone else. The story said he was faithfully waiting for someone, a girl with no name, no face, who only existed in his memories. Even the author wrote that she didn't know who Ethan was waiting for. When she tried to write a happy ending for him, it was as if the novel had developed a will of its own. He refused to meet anyone new. He remained unmarried for the rest of his life, growing old alone, forever murmuring the name of a girl he could never forget. The story ended with 2 words, to be continued. She closed the book, Ethan's face appearing in her mind's eye, and tears streamed down her cheeks. To be continued. Perhaps that was the best ending they could have hoped for.